My mother-in-law threw away my wedding dress, said it was taking up space. Would you believe me if I told you that the day I went looking for my wedding dress in the basement and realized it was gone, it felt like I'd just discovered an entire second life had been erased without warning? If you've ever had an item, something deeply personal, go missing, maybe you'll understand. But this wasn't just any item. This was the dress I'd worn on my wedding day. Ivory lace, delicate pearl buttons down the back, carefully pressed and sealed in a garment bag, tucked away on the upper shelf behind old moving boxes. I still remember the way it smelled. Faint traces of my mother's perfume lingered on the fabric, mingled with the sharp chemical scent of dry cleaning. That dress wasn't just a dress. It was my mother's hand on my shoulder in the bridal suite, my father's teary smile in the church pew, the life I'd built with Brian, all stitched together in 1,000 tiny threads. And one morning, after a week of Lois staying with us, it was gone. I want you to keep listening, because by the end of this story, you'll understand how that one moment, standing in our Plano, Texas basement, surrounded by Rubbermaid bins and the low hum of the dehumidifier, set off a chain reaction that would unravel every unspoken resentment I'd buried over 20 years. You'll see how a single act of decluttering, as my mother-in-law called it, ended up changing my marriage, my family, and the way I saw myself. But that morning, all I knew was that something was wrong. I'd gone down to the basement to look for the memory box I'd started for Emily, our oldest, because she had a family treasures project due for 5th grade. It was a Saturday, the kind of muggy, overcast Texas morning that makes your hair frizz the second you step outside. Brian was wrangling the kids upstairs, trying to get them dressed for soccer and dance, and Lois was, as usual, reorganizing something in the kitchen. I remember feeling that slight, familiar twinge of anxiety as I picked my way past the treadmill we never used, and the stacks of holiday decorations. Did I leave the box behind the Christmas tree stand, or by the old high chair? But when I climbed up on the step stool, my hand automatically reaching for the familiar blue garment bag, my fingers met nothing but the cold metal of the shelf. I blinked, moved a box, shuffled aside a bag of outgrown winter coats. Nothing. No dress, no garment bag, not even the thin layer of dust it usually collected. At first, I thought maybe I'd moved it and forgotten. It happens. You get busy, life blurs together, school pickup, grocery runs to Target, PTA meetings, the endless group texts about carpool logistics. But as I searched, opening every bin, baby clothes, old textbooks, a box of Brian's college trophies, I felt the panic rising. I even started laughing, that nervous, slightly hysterical laugh, convincing myself I was just being silly. Maybe I'd put it in the garage. Maybe it was at my parents' old house. But my parents had passed away years ago, and I knew. I'd seen that dress the last time I'd cleaned down here, maybe 6 months back. I called upstairs, my voice echoing against the concrete and the hum of the HVAC. "Brian, did you move my wedding dress?" He poked his head down the basement stairs, one eyebrow raised, holding Sam's soccer cleats in one hand and a banana in the other. "What?" "No, Jess, I haven't touched your stuff." He sounded distracted, already turning back to the chaos of Saturday mornings. "Did you check behind the shelving?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "It's not here. It's gone." He shrugged. "Maybe you put it somewhere else." I don't know. But even as I turned over every bin and bag, I had a sinking feeling in my stomach. I knew I hadn't moved it. Only one other person had been down here lately. The same person who'd spent her free time clearing out our pantry, rearranging my spice rack, and commenting on the waste of space our basement had become during her extended stay. Lois. It's hard to capture the exact feeling you get when you realize someone has crossed a line you didn't even know you needed to draw. For years, I'd smiled through Lois's little suggestions, the way she'd criticize my meal planning at Thanksgiving, or sigh dramatically over my messy mudroom, or offer to help by reorganizing my laundry room until nothing was where I'd left it. I told myself it was just her way, that I was lucky to have a mother-in-law so eager to be involved. But in that moment, staring at the empty shelf, the air thick with the scent of damp concrete and last Christmas's cinnamon potpourri, I felt something snap. I marched upstairs, suddenly aware of how my socks slipped on the hardwood and how the sunlight caught the dust motes in the kitchen. Lois was standing at the counter, carefully labeling a Tupperware container in her perfect slanted handwriting, as if she'd lived here her whole life. She wore her usual pressed khakis and a pastel sweater, hair set in tight curls, lips pursed. I tried to keep my tone light. "Lois, do you know what happened to my wedding dress?" She looked up, her face unreadable for a split second, then smiled. Tight, polite, the kind of smile you give a neighbor who's parked too close to your driveway. "Oh, that old thing? It was taking up so much space down there, Jessica. I thought you'd want to be practical about it. I put it in the donation pile for goodwill with the rest of the old clothes you never wear." For a moment I couldn't speak. It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. I gripped the edge of the counter, willing myself to stay calm. "You donated my wedding dress?" She didn't even flinch. "You're never going to wear it again, are you? And it's not like Emily is going to want something so outdated by the time she's grown. These things just take up space. You have to let go, Jessica. Sentimentality only holds you back." My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to breathe. The kitchen suddenly felt impossibly small, the ticking of the wall clock growing louder, the refrigerator humming in the background. For a split second, I wondered if maybe I was overreacting. After all, it was just a dress. But then I saw the look in her eyes, calm, superior, almost bored, as if she'd done me a favor. I glanced at Brian, who had wandered in, oblivious, phone in one hand, Sam tugging at his sleeve. I wanted him to see what was happening, to say something, to acknowledge how wrong this was. But he just gave me a distracted half-smile, already fielding a text from his brother about fantasy football. Lois turned back to her Tupperware, as if the conversation was over. "Honestly, Jessica, you should thank me. I made so much space down there. You'll be able to find everything now." I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But instead, I stood there, hands clenched, heart racing, and realized this wasn't just about the dress. This was about every time Lois had bulldozed her way into my home, my decisions, my family. Every time she'd made me feel like a guest in my own house. And suddenly I wondered, how much else had she let go without asking? But I didn't know the worst part yet. Trying to focus, I forced myself into autopilot. I got Emily ready for dance, braided her hair in the bathroom, pulled out Sam's shin guards from the laundry room. But my mind kept spinning, replaying the conversation with Lois. I remembered the time she'd redecorated our living room while we were on vacation. New pillows, a different rug, the art I'd chosen for above the fireplace swapped for one of her own. Or the time she'd accidentally thrown away the handprint turkey Emily made in preschool because it was just paper clutter. The way she'd always referred to my parenting style as permissive in front of the other moms at book club, as if I wasn't strict enough for her standards. I'd always brushed it off, told myself it was normal in-laws stuff. But this felt different. This felt like she was erasing me, piece by piece. After I dropped Emily at dance and Sam at soccer, I sat in the Target parking lot, the Texas heat baking the steering wheel under my hands, and cried. I called my best friend Amanda and choked out the story between sobs, the kind that make your throat ache. She listened quietly and then said, "Jess, this isn't about a dress. She's trying to control you. You know that, right?" I did know, but admitting it felt like opening a door I'd kept locked for years. Back at home, I tiptoed around Lois, who had moved on to reorganizing the pantry. She hummed to herself, content, as if nothing had happened. I realized then how little power I felt in my own house, how often I deferred to keep the peace, to avoid confrontation. Brian brushed off my concerns with a distracted, "She means well," and the kids barely noticed the tension, lost in their own worlds of soccer games and TikTok dances. That night, after everyone was asleep, I went back down to the basement. I stood in the middle of the room, the glow from the utility light casting long shadows on the concrete floor. I looked at the empty shelf where my dress used to hang, at the bins now neatly labeled in Lois's handwriting. I felt like a stranger in my own home. It hit me then. This wasn't just about space. It was about control. About Lois needing to assert her dominance in Brian's life, in my family, in my home. I thought about all the times I'd let her have her way. Told myself it was easier not to make waves. But now, staring at the gaping hole on the shelf, I wondered what it had cost me. My voice, my sense of belonging, my memories. But I still had no idea just how far Lois's interference had gone. I hadn't even scratched the surface. The next morning, as I was making coffee in the kitchen, trying to ignore the way Lois had rearranged the mugs so hers were at the front, Emily came in, clutching a piece of paper. "Mom, did you throw away my baby box? The one with the hospital bracelet and my first shoes?" My heart dropped. "No, honey, I didn't." Emily shrugged, unconcerned, and skipped off to watch cartoons. But I felt the blood drain from my face. I rushed down to the basement again, flinging open the bin where I'd kept Emily's keepsakes. Empty. Only a few scraps of old tissue paper at the bottom. Another box, labeled Jessica's college stuff, also empty. As the realization sunk in, I felt something inside me harden. This wasn't just Lois being helpful. This was Lois erasing my past, my memories, my place in this family. And I knew, without a doubt, that I had to do something. But what? How do you fight back against someone who's convinced they're always right? Someone who's already years ahead of you, quietly rewriting the story of your life? I had no idea what I was up against. But one thing was clear. If I didn't take a stand now, I might lose more than just a dress. I might lose myself. But what I didn't realize, not yet, was that this was only the beginning, and that the truth about what Lois had done would be so much worse than I could have ever imagined. My heart was pounding as I closed the basement door behind me, clutching the empty garment bag like it was some kind of evidence. The house above felt quiet, too quiet. I could hear the faint hum of the dishwasher cycling in the kitchen, the distant sound of a lawnmower from somewhere down the block on Maple Avenue, and the soft, persistent thud of my own pulse in my ears. I set the garment bag on the kitchen counter, next to the basket of unfolded laundry, and stared at it, willing it to give me answers. It didn't. All I could see was the smooth, white plastic, the little zipper pull still shiny, and the emptiness inside. Brian was at work, and the kids, Madeline and Ethan, were still at school. It was just me, the house, and Lois. I heard her before I saw her, her voice floating down the hallway from the living room, talking loudly into her phone as always, as if she needed the whole neighborhood to know what she was up to. I couldn't make out the words, but I heard my name, Jessica, followed by a sharp, dismissive laugh. I gripped the edge of the counter until my knuckles went white. I should have marched in there, demanded an explanation, demanded my dress back. But I hesitated, like I always seemed to with Lois. Instead, I took a deep breath, smoothed my hair, and walked into the living room, trying to channel my inner PTA president, a role I'd never wanted, but somehow always ended up with at every school. Lois sat on the sofa, her feet propped neatly on the coffee table, scrolling through her iPad like she owned the place. She looked up and gave me that tight, practiced smile, polite, but with an undertone that always made me feel like a guest in my own house. "Lois," I tried, my voice steadier than I felt. "Did you happen to see my wedding dress? The one in the basement in the garment bag?" She didn't look up from her iPad. "Oh, that old thing?" She waved a hand dismissively. "It was just taking up space down there. I thought you'd want to clear out some of that clutter." It was like a slap. I stared at her, searching her face for any hint of remorse or even understanding, but there was nothing, just that cool indifference. I tried to keep my tone even. That dress was important to me. I was saving it for Madeline. My voice wavered just a little on my daughter's name. Lois finally looked at me, her eyebrows lifting as if I'd just suggested something ridiculous. Jessica, honestly, when is Maddie ever going to wear a dress like that? Styles change. Sentimentality only makes a mess. You should thank me for helping you let go. The words stung. I felt my eyes start to burn, but I forced myself to keep it together. Where is it, Lois? Did you throw it away? She shrugged, setting her iPad down with a little sigh. I put it in the donation pile. The Goodwill truck came on Tuesday, I think. Or maybe it was Wednesday. It's gone now. She said it like she was talking about an empty milk carton, not a piece of my history. For a second, I just stood there, the room spinning a little. The scent of her floral perfume mixed with the faint aroma of the coffee I'd made that morning. The sunlight slanting through the blinds painted sharp lines across the carpet. I remember thinking, absurdly, that if I blinked, maybe this would all turn out to be a bad dream. But it wasn't. And Lois was already back to scrolling through her emails. Done with me. I walked out, feeling hollow, my hands shaking as I picked up my phone and texted Brian. Did your mom get rid of my wedding dress? I stared at the screen, waiting for the 3 little dots to appear. Nothing. I paced the kitchen, replaying the conversation in my head, trying to make sense of it. How could someone be so careless with something so precious? Or was it really carelessness? The kids burst through the front door at 3:15 sharp, Madeline's backpack bouncing, Ethan chattering about some game at recess. I plastered on a smile, ushered them into the kitchen, poured goldfish crackers into little bowls, and asked about their day. I could hear Lois in the background, humming to herself as she organized the mail. My mail, I realized, as I watched her sort through a pile of letters on the counter, setting aside envelopes with my name on them. That night, after dinner, takeout from Panera Bread because I couldn't face cooking, I sat in Madeline's room, helping her with her spelling words. She looked up at me with her big brown eyes, so much like Brian's, and asked, "Mommy, where's your pretty dress? The one you always told me about for dress-up?" I felt the tears prick again, but I swallowed them down. "I don't know, honey," I said softly. "Grandma gave it to someone else." She frowned, not understanding. "But it was yours." I nodded, brushing her hair behind her ear. "I know, sweetheart." After they were asleep, I sat on the edge of my bed, scrolling through old photos on my phone. My wedding day, my mother helping me into that dress, both of us laughing, my cheeks flushed with happiness. My mom had died 3 years ago, and that dress was the last thing we'd picked out together. I had planned to show Madeline every little bead and stitch, to pass down the story, the way my mom passed stories to me. Now, it was gone. The next morning, I went through the house with new eyes. I started in the basement, trying to make sense of the other empty boxes, my hands trembling as I pulled out bins and opened lids. My college photo albums, gone. The old ceramic bowl I'd made in high school art class, gone. Even the blanket my grandmother crocheted for me as a baby was missing from the cedar chest. I felt like I was walking through someone else's storage, not my own. Lois was in the kitchen again, humming as she wiped down the counters with that lemon-scented spray she insisted on bringing from her house in Houston. I watched her move, efficient and precise, putting everything in its proper place. I realized, with a sinking feeling, that she'd been doing this for years, rearranging, donating, helping in ways I never asked for. Always with that same polite smile, always with the implication that I was just a little bit inadequate. Brian called me from work that afternoon, finally responding to my text. "Hey Jess, Mom said she was just decluttering. I know you're upset, but maybe it's time to let some of that stuff go. We have so much down there, and the kids need more space to play, right?" His voice was gentle, but I could hear the discomfort. He hated conflict, especially when it involved his mom. I wanted to scream that this wasn't about clutter or space or even the kids. It was about respect, about boundaries, about me. But I didn't. I just said, "Okay," and hung up. That evening, I called my best friend Amanda, desperate for someone to see things from my side. We met at Starbucks on the corner of Park Avenue and Main, a place where the baristas knew us by name and the air always smelled like burnt espresso and cinnamon. Amanda listened as I poured out the whole story, her eyes wide with disbelief. She did what? Amanda nearly spilled her iced coffee. Jessica, that's insane. Who does that? My mother-in-law, apparently, I muttered, tracing patterns on my paper napkin. Amanda leaned in, her voice dropping. You need to stand up to her. Seriously. My mother-in-law once threw out my entire collection of Christmas ornaments because she thought they were tacky. I lost it. You can't let her walk all over you like this. I wanted to believe her, but it felt impossible. Lois had this way of making me feel small, like any protest was just more evidence of my immaturity. And there was always Brian in the middle, pleading for peace. Amanda squeezed my hand. You're not crazy. This isn't normal. You have every right to be upset. What does Brian say? I shrugged. He says we need the space, that it's just stuff. Amanda rolled her eyes. It's not just stuff. It's your life, your memories. You need to talk to him again, really talk to him, and maybe talk to Lois too. She needs to hear how much this hurt you. I nodded, but my stomach was in knots. I knew Amanda was right, but the thought of confronting Lois again made me feel sick. I remembered the look on her face, the total lack of remorse, the certainty that she was right and I was just being dramatic. When I got home that night, the house was quiet. Brian was in the den, watching the Cowboys game, beer in hand. I sat next to him on the couch, the flicker of the TV casting blue shadows across the room. Brian, can we talk? I said softly. He muted the TV, looking at me with tired eyes. About Mom? About all of it, I said. The dress, the boxes, everything. I feel like she's trying to erase me from this house. I know you don't want to fight, but I need you to see how much this hurts. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. Jess, I get it, okay? But she's trying to help. That's how she shows love. She doesn't mean to hurt you. I shook my head. But she is hurting me. And you keep asking me to let it go, but if I keep letting it go, there won't be anything of me left here. I need you to back me up. He was quiet for a long moment. I'll talk to her, he said finally. But can you try to see it from her side too? She's just old-fashioned. I didn't answer. I just leaned my head on his shoulder, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every conversation, every moment Lois had crossed some invisible line. The time she repainted our living room to brighten it up while we were away for the weekend. The time she threw out the kids' homemade pottery because it was clutter. The way she always reorganized my pantry, my closet, even the bathroom drawers, as if my way of doing things was never quite good enough. But this was different. This was my wedding dress, my past, my mother's memory. The next day, as I was sorting the mail, I noticed something odd. A receipt tucked between the bills. It was from a storage facility on Spring Street, dated just last week, with Lois's name on it. My heart skipped a beat. Why would she need a storage unit? Had she put some of my things there instead of donating them? Or was there something else she was hiding? I slipped the receipt into my pocket, my mind racing with possibilities. Maybe not everything was gone. Maybe there was still a chance to get some of it back. But I knew, deep down, that this was about more than just lost things. It was about control, about boundaries, about finally standing up for myself. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't know, was just how deep Lois's interference went, or that the truth about what she'd really done was so much bigger than a few missing boxes. If you're feeling as shocked as I was in that moment, hit the like button so I know you're with me. And make sure you subscribe, because this story is only getting started. I promise, the next part will have you questioning everything you thought you knew about family. Because when I finally decided to confront Lois about the storage unit, I had no idea the secret she'd been keeping would turn my world completely upside down. I barely slept that night. My mind was racing, replaying every awkward interaction I'd had with Lois since she'd arrived. Every comment she'd made about streamlining our home, every time she'd glanced around the living room with that barely concealed look of disapproval. The receipt for the storage unit was burning a hole in my robe pocket, and I kept reaching for it, smoothing the paper out, as if it might suddenly reveal some new clue. I had 1,000 questions but no answers, just this gnawing feeling that I'd been living in my own house as a guest, not the woman of the home. That morning, I dropped the kids off at school, Ryan's soccer gear slung over my shoulder, Abigail's backpack bouncing on her back as she skipped up the sidewalk to Plano Elementary. I waved to Mrs. Fields, who was always volunteering for carpool duty, and tried to act normal, but I felt like everyone could see right through me, like there was a scarlet letter on my chest. Bad daughter-in-law. On the way home, I pulled into Starbucks, ordered my usual skinny vanilla latte, and sat in the corner, staring out at the parking lot as the Texas sun climbed higher and hotter. I called Amanda, my best friend. She always knew how to talk me down when I was spiraling. She answered on the second ring. "Jess, you sound like you've been dragged through Target on Black Friday." I tried to laugh, but it caught in my throat. "Amanda, she's gone too far this time. My wedding dress is gone. And not just that, she's been donating my things, putting them in a storage unit, and not telling me." Amanda's sigh was sympathetic. "You need to confront her. You can't keep letting her bulldoze you. This is your house." But what if Brian sides with her again? I found an old email. He basically gave her the green light to clear out the basement. He probably didn't even read it, but still. "Jess, you have to talk to both of them. If you don't, she'll just keep doing it. You'll lose more than boxes. You'll lose yourself." Her words echoed in my mind all the way home. I parked in our driveway, staring at the neat rows of houses on Oak Street, the perfectly trimmed lawns, the flags fluttering in the humid breeze. Everything looked so normal, so peaceful, but I felt like I was standing on the edge of an earthquake. Inside, Lois was in the kitchen, humming while she reorganized the pantry. The sound grated on my nerves. I watched her line up the cereal boxes, moving my favorite granola to the top shelf. Out of my reach, but right at eye level for her. It was such a small thing, but it was all part of the same pattern. I took a deep breath, clutching the receipt. "Lois, can we talk?" She looked up, her expression carefully neutral. "Of course, Jessica. Is something wrong?" I held up the receipt. "I found this. Why do you have a storage unit in Plano? And why is it full of my things?" Her mouth tightened. For a moment, I thought she might deny everything, but instead she set down the box of Cheerios and wiped her hands on her apron. "I didn't throw away everything, Jessica. I thought you'd appreciate that. There were some things I just couldn't stand to see cluttering up the house, but I knew you were sentimental, so I put them in storage. I was going to tell you." My voice shook. "But you didn't tell me. You just decided what mattered and what didn't. You threw away my wedding dress, Lois. That wasn't your choice to make." She shrugged, as if I'd accused her of forgetting to buy milk. "It was yellowing, taking up so much space. I thought you'd moved on. It's just a dress. Just a dress." The words echoed in my head, and I felt a wave of nausea. I thought about my mother, the day we'd picked out the dress together at that little boutique in Dallas, how she'd cried when she saw me in it. My mother was gone now, the dress one of the last tangible pieces of her I had left. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but I forced myself to stay calm. "You had no right. You've been making choices for me since the day I married Brian. Redecorating my living room, rearranging my kitchen, telling the kids they can't have dessert before dinner even when I say it's fine." Lois cut me off, her tone sharp. "I was trying to help. You have so much on your plate, Jessica. I thought if I took care of a few things, you'd have more time for your family. Isn't that what a good grandmother does?" I stared at her, unsure whether to laugh or cry. She genuinely believed she was doing me a favor, or maybe that was just her story. Either way, I couldn't let her rewrite my life any longer. "I want my things back," I said quietly. "All of them. And I want you to promise right now that you'll never touch my things, or the kids, without asking me first. She hesitated, her lips pressed into a thin line. If that's what you want. It's not just what I want. It's what I need. This is my home. She nodded, but I could see the storm brewing in her eyes. That night, I finally told Brian everything. The dress, the keepsakes, the storage unit. We sat on the porch, the sticky Texas air buzzing with the sound of cicadas and distant lawnmowers. He looked tired, older than I remembered. Stress lines etched across his forehead. She shouldn't have done that, he said finally. I'll talk to her. A flicker of relief, but also resentment. Why did it always fall to me to stand up for myself? Why couldn't he see how much this hurt? I pressed on. Brian, she's been undermining me for years. I let it go because I wanted to keep the peace, but I can't anymore. I need you to back me up. He nodded, but his shoulders slumped. I get it. I should have paid more attention. I'll help you get your things from the storage unit. And I'll talk to Mom. The next morning, we drove across town to the storage facility, a bland concrete building on the edge of an industrial park. Brian let me unlock the unit. The door rolled up with a metallic groan, revealing a haphazard pile of boxes, old toys, photo albums, even the Afghan my grandmother had crocheted for me at my wedding. I wanted to cry with relief and fury, but the garment bag, the wedding dress, wasn't there. I rifled through every box, my hands shaking, dust rising in the sunlight. Nothing. Just empty hangers, pressed flowers, a few yellowed cards. Brian watched in silence, his face unreadable. I'm sorry, Jess. I sank onto the concrete floor, hugging my knees. It's not just about the dress, Bree. It's about everything. I feel like I don't belong in my own house. Like I'm just a placeholder until your mother says otherwise. He crouched beside me, touching my shoulder. That's not true. I know I haven't made it easy. But I want you to feel at home. I'll talk to her. We'll set boundaries. I looked at him, searching his face for sincerity. For the first time, I saw how much he hated conflict, how he'd been trying to keep everyone happy and ended up pleasing no one. We loaded the boxes into the back of the Suburban, the silence between us heavy but somehow more honest than before. Back home, I unpacked my keepsakes, placing each item carefully on the guest bed. Abigail wandered in, her eyes wide. Mommy, what's all this? I smiled, blinking back tears. These are memories, honey. Things from when I was a little girl. Things that are important to me. She picked up a faded photo of me and my mother, her tiny finger tracing my face. Can I keep this in my room? I hesitated, then nodded. Of course. We'll make a special memory box together. Something shifted inside me then, a quiet resolve. I couldn't get the dress back, but I could reclaim my space, my story, one box at a time. That afternoon, I called Amanda. You were right. I confronted her. We got most of my things back, but the dress is gone. Amanda's voice was soft. I'm so sorry, Jess. But you did it. You stood up for yourself. Yeah, I said, surprised that it felt almost like victory. I did. But just when I thought it was over, that I'd finally drawn the line, another twist blindsided me. I was sorting through the last of the boxes when I found an envelope, thick and heavy, with my name on it in Lois's handwriting. Inside was a letter. I sat on the edge of the bed, the late afternoon light slanting through the blinds, and unfolded it with trembling hands. Jessica, I know you'll be angry when you read this, but I want you to understand. I didn't throw your dress away. I donated it to the Plano Bridal Project. They help women who can't afford wedding gowns. I thought your dress could give someone else happiness. Maybe you'll see it as a gift someday. If I was wrong, I'm sorry. Lois. My heart pounded. I reread the letter 3 times, my anger shifting into something more complicated. Relief that the dress hadn't ended up in a landfill. Resentment that she'd made this decision without me. Confusion that she thought she was doing something good. I called the Plano Bridal Project, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped my phone. The woman on the other end was kind, but the dress had already been given to a bride in need. There was no way to get it back. I hung up, staring at the letter. Tears slid down my face, hot and bitter. I wanted to be furious, but I also felt a stab of guilt. Was I being selfish for holding onto a dress I'd never wear again? Or was it selfish of Lois to decide my memories weren't worth keeping? That night, over dinner, I told Brian and the kids what Lois had done. Abigail looked sad for me, but Ryan, ever practical, shrugged. Maybe it'll make someone else happy, Mom. Brian reached for my hand under the table. We'll make new memories. We'll start new traditions. I nodded, but a piece of me still ached for what was lost. When Lois came into the kitchen later, I handed her the letter. I got your note. I called the bridal project. I wish you'd talk to me first. She looked at me, her eyes unexpectedly soft. I thought I was helping. I really did. I took a deep breath. Next time, let me decide what I want to give away. She nodded. I promise. And in that moment, something unspoken passed between us. A truce, maybe. Or just a weary acceptance that we'd never see the world the same way. But we'd have to find a way to share it. But as I loaded the dishwasher that night, watching the shadows stretch across the backyard, I realized this was just one battle in a much bigger war. There were still wounds that needed healing, boundaries that needed building. But for the first time, I felt like I had a say in the life we were making here on Oak Street. And just when I thought I'd uncovered every secret, a notification pinged on Brian's phone. He read it, his face going pale. Jess, you need to see this. He handed me the phone, and what I saw made my stomach drop. It was an email from Lois, sent weeks ago, asking Brian if she should take care of the old photo albums too. He'd never replied. I looked at him, my heart pounding. Did you tell her she could? He shook his head, eyes wide. No, I didn't even see this. My mind raced. What else had she decided to take care of? What else might be missing, donated, or given away without my knowledge? My relief from earlier vanished, replaced by a fresh wave of dread and determination. The truth was, the battle for my own home wasn't over. There were still stories hidden in closets and boxes, still decisions being made about my life without my consent. But now, at least, I was ready to fight for every single piece. And what happened next, well, it changed everything. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lois's emails, her careful words, so polite, so reasonable on the surface, layered over with the memory of her hands smoothing the plastic garment bag of my wedding dress, her voice echoing in my mind. It was just taking up space, Jessica. I lay in bed beside Brian, the hum of the ceiling fan filling the silence, and counted all the things in my life that felt suddenly unstable. My marriage, my home, even my memories. When I finally drifted off, it was to a restless sleep filled with fragments. My mother's laughter as we zipped up the ivory dress in that Dallas bridal shop, the clink of hangers in the basement, the empty space where my keepsake box had been. I woke before dawn, the Texas sky still black outside, and slipped out of bed as quietly as I could. I padded downstairs, passing the family photos on the wall, our wedding portrait, the kids' school pictures, all those carefully preserved moments, and let myself into the garage. I needed air, but more than that, I needed to see for myself that I wasn't going crazy. The basement was chilly, the concrete cool under my bare feet. I turned on the light and stood for a moment, taking in the half-empty shelves, the neatness that Lois always insisted on. It looked almost staged, like a model home. No clutter, no mess, no sign that a family actually lived here. I went over to the boxes stacked by the far wall, the ones Lois hadn't managed to organize out of existence yet. I opened one, searching for a sign of the life I'd built here. My old college yearbooks were still there, my daughter's first pair of ballet slippers, the hand-painted mug my son had made for me in kindergarten. Relief and sadness tangled inside me. How much longer would these last, I wondered, before they, too, became Just taking up space? I sat on the bottom step and pulled my knees to my chest, trying to breathe through the ache in my throat. I thought about calling Amanda, but it was barely 6 in the morning, and I knew she'd be wrangling her twins before school. I didn't want to cry. I wanted to act. That's when the idea hit me. Sudden, sharp, almost reckless. The storage unit. The receipt I'd found in Lois's purse, dated only a week ago. Some part of me clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, my things weren't gone forever. By the time Brian came down for coffee, I was dressed and had my keys in hand. He blinked at me, still half asleep, and reached for the Keurig. "You're up early." "I'm going to check something," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "At the U-Store Id off Park Avenue. I think Mom might have moved some of my things there." He frowned, cup halfway to his lips. "Jess, do you want me to?" I shook my head. "No. I need to do this myself." He nodded, and for once, didn't argue. I grabbed my purse, pulled on my sneakers, and stepped out into the crisp Plano morning. The air smelled like cut grass and the promise of a fresh start. I held on to that as I drove, every mile a silent pep talk. I could do this. I had to. The storage facility was tucked behind a strip mall, sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a Jiffy Lube. I parked in front of the manager's office, my heart beating so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I walked in, clutching the receipt in my sweaty palm. The woman behind the counter looked up from her computer, her name tag reading, Marcia. She smiled, the kind of practiced, polite smile you get used to in suburbia. "How can I help you?" I slid the receipt across the counter, my voice barely above a whisper. "I think my mother-in-law rented a unit here. I need to see what's inside. It's my property. My name's not on the account, but..." She cut me off gently, glancing at the receipt. "Lois Williams, Unit 107. Are you Mrs. Williams?" I hesitated. "I'm her daughter-in-law. Look, she put some of my things in there without asking. I just need..." Marcia's eyes softened. Maybe she recognized the panic in my face, or maybe she'd heard stories like mine before. "I can't let you in without her permission, ma'am. But if you give her a call, and she gives me the okay, I'll take you back." I swallowed my pride. My hands shook as I dialed Lois's number. She answered on the third ring, her voice brisk as always. "Jessica?" "Lois, I'm at the storage facility. I know you rented a unit. There are things of mine in there, things I want back. Marcia says you have to give permission." There was a pause, the kind that stretches out like a held breath. Then, "Well, I suppose it's only fair. I didn't throw everything away, you know. Some of it just didn't seem right for goodwill." Relief flooded me, mingled with irritation. "Can you please let them know I'm allowed in?" She sighed, as if I'd asked for the moon. "Fine, but I want you to understand, Jessica. Sometimes letting go of things is healthy." I bit back a retort. "I'll be out of your way in 20 minutes. She must have called Marcia, because a moment later, Marcia waved me over. "You're good to go. Down the hall, first left." The corridor smelled like cardboard and mothballs. The lock on 107 clicked open in my hand. When I lifted the door, my breath caught. There, stacked in neat labeled boxes, were pieces of my life. The quilt my grandmother made, my childhood Christmas ornaments, my daughter's baby clothes in a plastic tub, even the old prom dress I'd never had the heart to part with. But the garment bag with my wedding dress wasn't there. I knelt on the concrete and started opening boxes, my hands trembling so badly I could hardly work the tape. Old letters, photo albums, the blue vase my mom had left me. But no dress. It took me a minute to register the sound of footsteps behind me. I turned, expecting Marcia, but it was Brian, eyes tired but determined. He held a coffee in each hand, awkward and earnest. "I figured you'd want company." For a moment, I just stared at him, speechless. Then I laughed, a shaky, tearful sound. "You always know when to show up." He set down the coffee and squatted beside me, peering into the boxes. "Anything?" I shook my head, swallowing hard. No dress. I think it's gone. He put an arm around my shoulders, pulling me close. I'm sorry, Jess. I should have paid more attention. I stopped him. It's not your fault. It's not. But I want you to see this. I want you to know what this means to me. He nodded, his jaw set. I do. Now, more than ever. We sat there in silence, surrounded by the remnants of our shared life, the pieces that Lois hadn't managed to erase. I realized that, in a strange way, this cold, dusty storage unit was the most honest our marriage had felt in years. No more pretending. No more smoothing things over for appearance's sake. Just the messiness of real life, laid bare. When we got home, Lois was at the kitchen table, reading the Plano Star-Courier and sipping her third cup of coffee. She didn't look up when we came in. I set the boxes down, my movements deliberate. I went to the storage unit. I took back what was mine. She folded her paper with a snap, her expression unflinching. I hope you didn't strain yourself. I studied her face, searching for any flicker of remorse, but found only that familiar wall of polite indifference. Lois, you crossed a line. These things, my wedding dress, my keepsakes, they mattered to me. You had no right. She met my gaze, her eyes hard. Jessica, you've been in this house for 12 years, and every corner is still cluttered with your memories. Sometimes you have to clear out the past to make room for the future. Brian stepped in then, his voice steady. Mom, enough. This is our home. You don't get to decide what stays and what goes. For a moment, Lois looked genuinely startled. Maybe she'd expected me to back down, to smooth things over again. But I didn't. I stood my ground, heart racing. I'm not asking for your approval anymore, I said quietly. I'm done letting you erase me from my own life. There was a silence so thick I could hear the clock ticking above the fridge. Then Lois stood, gathering her purse, her mouth a tight line. I think it's time I found somewhere else to stay. Clearly, my help isn't wanted. She left without another word. The door closed behind her with a finality that echoed through the kitchen. I stood there, shaking, the adrenaline slow to fade. Brian wrapped me in a hug, and for the first time in what felt like years, I let myself lean into him. Not as someone who needed his mother's approval or his mediation, but as his partner, an equal. The days that followed were quiet. Lois moved into a hotel, her calls less frequent. The kids noticed her absence, but I told them only that Grandma needed some time away. What I didn't say was that I needed time too, to reclaim my space, to breathe, to remember who I was before I started trying so hard to please everyone else. I spent a weekend with my daughter, Haley, pulling out the memory boxes we'd rescued from the storage unit. We made a new project, a memory box just for her, filled with photos, letters, and a little journal where she could write about what mattered to her. I told her the story of my wedding dress, and she listened carefully, her eyes wide. Will I get to wear your dress someday? She asked. I blinked back tears. It's not here anymore, sweetheart. But we can make new memories together. That's what's important. She smiled, and I realized she understood more than I gave her credit for. Maybe it wasn't about the dress at all. Maybe it was about the stories we carry forward, the ones we choose to keep. Brian and I talked late into the night, sorting through what had happened, what it meant. He apologized, again, for not seeing Lois's patterns sooner. I forgave him, but more importantly, I forgave myself, for staying silent too long, for doubting my own feelings, for letting someone else decide what mattered to me. The next week, I started setting new boundaries, not just with Lois, but with everyone. I joined a new book club, signed up for a pottery class, and set aside Sundays for family, just us. I learned to say no, even when it felt uncomfortable. And slowly, the house started to feel like mine again. Lois eventually moved back to her own home in Houston. Our relationship cooled, but it wasn't entirely broken. We spoke on holidays, exchanged cards, kept things civil for the kids, but I never let her stay overnight again. That boundary held. There are still days when I miss my wedding dress, when I close my eyes and remember the way it shimmered in the light, my mother's hands buttoning the back, the way Brian looked at me the first time he saw me walk down the aisle. But those moments live in my heart, not in a garment bag. I learned that memories can't be thrown away, no matter how hard someone tries. Sometimes, when I pass the basement, I pause for a moment and smile. The shelves are a little messier now, a little more crowded with life. And that's exactly how I want it. If you're still listening, thank you for sticking with me through this emotional roller coaster. I'd love to know, have you ever had to fight for something that mattered to you, even when others didn't understand? What would you have done in my place? Leave a comment and let's talk about it together. And if you thought this story was wild, wait until you hear what happened the night of my daughter's graduation. I promise you won't believe who betrayed me next. Hit subscribe and I'll see you in the next story.